understanding the nature of the NGO. So the first and foremost step is to understand what type of organization it is. Some institutions may also invest their surplus fund. So in that case, whether the returns are properly recorded or not. Then the auditor has to provide a report on the audited financial statements of that particular educational institutions. Hello everyone, I am LIABILITIES, Faculty of Commerce, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. I welcome you all for the sessions of Principles and Practice of Auditing. We are discussing about the fourth chapter, that is Company Audit and Audit of Other Entities. In today's session, let us discuss about the audit of various entities. So, for the first and foremost, let us discuss about the audit procedure for NGOs. That means non-governmental organizations. So basically, non-governmental organizations are those organizations which exist with a view to achieve the social objectives. So here, as we can see, so far we have discussed the audit procedure for profit organizations. So here there are some other organizations apart from the companies or business organization in which the audit procedure is done. And here the set of audit procedures done are quite different from the profit making organizations. Auditing NGOs, that is non-governmental organizations, involves ensuring that the financial statements of an NGO are accurately representing the financial position. Auditing of these type of organizations requires attention on how funds are received or how funds are utilized and whether they are recorded or accounted for properly or not. Now, let us understand the audit procedure of NGOs. So, the first and foremost procedure in the process of auditing of an NGO involves understanding the nature of the NGO. So, the first and foremost step is to understand what type of organization it is, like whether it is registered as a trust or a society or under the Companies Act. Then, what are its objectives? So, with what purpose it is existing? Then, understanding the source of income. What are its sources? Like, are these NGOs are getting sources of income from the donations and grants, or from membership fees and fundraising events, and how the pattern of expenditure it is, and what are the areas or projects that the NGOs take up. So, understanding the nature of the NGO. So, next it involves understanding the regulatory framework. That means there are certain regulations and laws in which the NGOs are adhered to. Say for example, IT Act. So, under IT Act, Section 12A and under Section 80G, there are some of the exemptions for the NGOs revenues. So, NGOs are exempted from tax. So, whether this company is in compliance with the regulations of that particular Income Tax Act or not. If the NGO is receiving foreign fund, then it must ensure or adhere to FCRA rules. FCRA here means Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. So, here the auditor checks whether the NGOs are adhered to these kinds of rules or not. Next, it is planning the audit. So, the next procedure is to plan the audit. So, here in planning, what are the statements of accounts that the auditor must look into? It involves income and expenditure account, or cash inflow and cash outflow, how and what are its sources of income, how the expenditure is carried on, and doing a risk assessment, like identifying what are the areas of mismanagement of funds that may happen in a non-governmental organizations. Then setting the materiality levels, what are the areas that the auditor must concentrate on. Next procedure is to review the internal control system of the NGOs. So here it is concerned about what are the donations and grants received and are they really accounted for, or are they recorded accurately or not. And there will be some kind of donor restrictions, amounts that are received as donations. So are these amounts are utilized only for that specific purpose or not? Are there any internal control methods to ensure that all kinds of expenditures are recorded properly or not? And also how NGOs handle cash donations, as most of the transactions of NGOs involves cash handling or cash donations. Then next step is to examine the financial statements. So here, what are the financial statements of an NGO to be verified? It includes again income and expenditure statements on the balance sheet, and how the cash inflows, what are the sources of income, whether it is donations, grants, etc. Then the auditor have to verify the receipts. So here receipts includes the receipts of donations and grants, whether they are really accounted properly, entered in the financial statements or not. And also if there are any funds that arise from fundraising events or membership fees, whether they are accordingly entered in the financial statements or not. Say for example, if an NGO receives rupees 1 lakh for school construction, so checking or verifying whether that NGO has utilized that rupees 1 lakh only for that particular purpose of school construction or not. Then the auditor has to check for the expenditure verification. What are the expenditures made by that particular organizations? Say for example, the expenditure related to some program activities which are with a mission of achieving either education or health or social welfare related objectives. And some of the administrative expenses like staff salary or rent payment, and also some of the capital expenditure including expenses spent on the land and building, etc. Then there will be donor imposed restrictions. Say for example, a donor has given certain sum of money for to be used for a specific purpose only. Say Mr. A has given 50,000 only for health purpose. So here checking whether this fund has been utilized according to the donor restrictions. Then the auditor has to check for the compliance with legal and regulatory requirements. Again, the NGOs must adhere to the IT rules or FCRA and consult if it is registered as a society, the Societies Act, or if the NGO is registered as a trust, then it must adhere to the Trust Act, etc. Then finally, the auditor gives an audit report whether the financial statements of the NGO are true and fair, and also he has to mention the observations he has made, any kind of weaknesses or errors that have been found, or any kind of mismanagement that has been found in the NGOs. This was all regarding the audit procedure of NGOs. So let us look into the audit procedures of charitable institutions. So here the charitable institutions are those institutions which put their money, property and efforts for the improvement of human rights and also their lives. So just like the NGOs, the charitable institutions like trust or NGOs or any religious community are aimed to provide the benefits for their community. Their primary goal is to provide public benefits. Just like the NGOs, these charitable institutions also receive income from grants and donations. So it is important to ensure that these are all accounted properly or not, just to ensure the transparency and accountability of the income received, and also to ensure that there is proper financial position viewed based or through the financial statements. An auditor in the process of auditing a charitable institution, some of the key areas that he has to concentrate includes verification of receipts. So here receipts for the charitable institutions will be the donations or the grants or any kind of funds that are received. Charitable institutions often rely heavily on the funds received or the donations received from individuals, corporates or any other, or some foreign authorities or foreign individuals, etc. The auditor needs to verify whether all these donations are entered properly and properly accounted for, and also whether all these are classified properly as individual, whether these funds are classified properly like as voluntary donations or grants or endowments, etc. Charitable institutions may also receive grants from both government and private institutions or organizations. So here the auditor must ensure whether these funds are utilized properly according to the specified conditions and terms or not. If the institution collects any kind of membership fees or subscription charges, the auditor has to check for it. Then he has to verify the expenditures also. So what are the activities that are conducted by the charitable institutions for the purpose of public welfare? So all this expenditures and expenses, how the amount was utilized should be checked, whether this donor specific conditions were met or not, whether the fund received by the government grants are utilized properly for that particular purpose or not. Then the auditor has to check for the administrative expenses as well as the staff salaries, etc. Then coming to the assets and investments, even the charitable institutions will have assets like land and building and also other machineries may be utilized for public interest. So here the auditor has to check whether this institution is making use of those kinds of asset only for the public welfare or not. You should make sure that there are no any kind of misuse of assets and investments of the institutions. Some institutions may also invest their surplus fund. So in that case, whether the returns are properly recorded or not. So this is the work of the auditor to ensure the investments and returns on the investments. Then internal controls. So here what are the controlling methods that are used by that particular organizations in order to properly record all the incomes and expenses in the financial statements have to be checked. Then statutory compliance, whether the charitable institution is in compliance with the statutory laws and regulations. So various laws and regulations like Income Tax Act or Societies Act or a Trust Act, etc. Then the auditor has to check whether there are any foreign contributions for the charitable institutions. So if there are any foreign contributions or income received, then they must adhere to the FCRA rules. Apart from this, the auditor has to look for the legal documents, the memorandum of association or the incorporation or the trust deed, etc. All these documents must be verified, and proper accounting system verification should be done by the auditors. The audit of a charitable institution is vital for any kind of audit process in order to ensure the accountability, transparency in the charitable institutions and their financial reporting. As they deal with the public funds, it is important to make the best use of those funds, and it is important to gain the trust of the donors and other organizations. Now, let us see the audit procedure for educational institutions. So, the educational institutions involves various kinds of schools, colleges, universities, etc. that offer education to the students. So it is important to know about the accountability and transparency of all the financial transactions that are involved with these educational institutions. So it might be the government organizations or the public organizations. A proper auditing procedure helps to ensure that these educational institutions are making the best use of the funds in order to give proper education to the students, as well as they are meeting all kinds of other expectations of both the employees or the students and other stakeholders of all the educational institutions. Some of the key areas to focus during the audit includes the receipts and income. And for the educational institutions, the receipts and income may be the tuition fees or the admission fees or the examination fees, etc. So, checking whether the fees that are received by the students are properly recorded or not, and if there are any other incomes and grants received either by the government or other private institutions, that must be recorded properly. And the auditor has to verify here, are there any other incomes that are received by these institutions? Say for example, there may be interest received on the bank deposits. So here it is the duty of the auditor to check and verify all the receipts and income of that particular educational institutions. Then they have to check for the payment and expenditure. So what are the expenses of an educational institutions? Some of the expenditures of the educational institutions may involve salaries and wages paid to the employees or the teachers working there or to the administrative staff, etc. And there may be expenditures on the repairs and maintenance of the classrooms and the building. And there may be scholarships and awards that are given to the students and the various activities conducted in the educational institutions. So all these expenditures, whether they are recorded properly or whether there are any kind of mismanagement of in the recording of the expenditures here or not, then the auditor also have to check for the grants and donations received, if any. So some of the government organizations or the private individuals or the private institutions may also donate and provide grants to the some of the educational institutions. So if there are any kind of donations and grants, are these receipts of income are properly recorded and accounted for, and also are these incomes received for that particular specific purpose only are to be recorded properly in the financial statements and are to be checked properly by the auditors. And here the auditor has to check for the assets and liabilities. Some of the assets and liabilities of the educational institutions may involve like building, furniture, equipment and other machineries, etc. So the auditor has to assess whether these assets are properly recorded in the books of accounts or not. There may be depreciation on these assets. So here the auditor has to check whether this depreciation is calculated on the assets or not. And there may be any kind of extra expenses and liabilities for that particular organization. The liabilities may include loans and borrowings of that particular institutions. So these are to be checked by the auditor. An effective internal control system for all kinds of organization, including the educational institution, is necessary in order to ensure that all these financial transactions are recorded properly and the records are maintained properly. The audit procedure for the educational institutions also includes the preliminary planning. That means what are the areas of risk in educational institutions. Like say for example, there may be mismanagement of cash or in the calculation of wage that is paid to the staff or the employees. So just like that, they have to plan here what are the areas of risk and also what type of educational institution it is. So whether it is a government owned or a private owned, based on that the auditor has to plan for the audit. Then OCHing. OCHing here refers to checking for all the evidences and the documents that support the financial transactions. Then they have to verify the assets and liabilities of that particular educational organization. Then and also reviewing of the financial statements of the educational institutions. So whether the assets and liabilities or the all kinds of incomes, grants or any kind of fees that is received by the students are properly entered or not, and what are the types of accounts that are maintained, whether it is income and expenditure account, balance sheet and receipts and payments account are to be checked by the auditor. Then the auditor has to provide a report on the audited financial statements of that particular educational institutions, whether these educational institutions financial statements are true and fair, or whether there are any kind of weaknesses found either in the internal control system or in the financial transactions or in the mismanagement of the funds, etc. So once the audit is complete, the auditor prepares the audit report, which includes the audit opinion that whether these financial statements are depicting the accurate values or not, and also he has to write the observations that are made, what are the weaknesses identified Along with that, he has to give some recommendations how the improvements can be made in the financial record maintenance of the educational institutions. This was all regarding the audit procedure for the NGOs, charitable institution and also educational institutions. So hope you all have understood it. Thank you.